I've had an opportunity to look at this because we're at a real critical time in this study. We have invested weeks and weeks and weeks in this man's life, and we have opportunity now to really capitalize on what we've learned. And so as we end the chapter 35, we're going to be looking, I'm not sure how much of 36 we'll be looking at, because soon now the Joseph narrative comes into play, which is really dominates the whole end of, from chapter 37 on through chapter 49 of Genesis is really the story of Joseph. So the story of Jacob is kind of put on a shelf, and the story of Joseph comes forth. Well, I'm now working on how are we going to work with that, because I want to, at some point, we'll move ahead to chapter 50 for the blessings, the final blessings of Jacob to his sons. But there is so much now at the end of this chapter. I've been going back and looking at all of the texts from chapter 25, and I'm correlating and starting to put together some ideas, some big ideas that we can derive from this study. And it has really, really been fun. So beginning this morning, we're going to start looking at larger amounts of texts and correlating and coming up with some discussions and some conclusions based on this. So we'll be doing that the next few weeks. Hey, Carl. But in order to get started, and of course our time is short this morning, but let's read, we haven't looked at this for a month, but for context, we're going to be focusing on verse 22 of this chapter, which is a very troubling verse. When you read it, your head's just you're going to go on tilt. But I'm going to attempt over the next few weeks to look at this and to explain it, at least from my perspective, or to offer an interpretation. And but to get the full context here, let's read Genesis 35, 16 through 29. 29 is the last verse. Let's read the whole thing out loud, and then I'll make some comments.
And they journeyed from Bethel, and there was but a little way to come to Ephrath, and Rachel travailed, and she had a hard labor. And it came to pass, when she was in hard labor, that the midwife said to her, Fear not, thou shalt have a son, this son also. And it came to pass, as her soul was departing, for she died, that she called his name Benoni, but his father called him Benjamin. And Rachel died and was buried in the way to Ephrath, which is Bethlehem. And Jacob set a pillar upon her grave, that is the pillar of Rachel's grave unto this day. And Israel journeyed and spread his tent beyond the town of Adar. And it came to pass, when Israel dwelt in that land, that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine. And Israel heard it. Now the sons of Jacob were 12.
Next.
The sons of Leah, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, then Simeon, and Levi, and Judah, and Issachar, and Zebulun. The sons of Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin. The sons of Bilhah, Rachel's maid, Dan and Naphtali. And the sons of Zilpah, Leah's maid, Gad and Asher. These are the sons of Jacob who were born to him in Paddan Aram. Jacob came to his father Isaac at Mamre of Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had sojourned. Now the days of Isaac were 180 years. Isaac breathed his last and died and was gathered to his people, an old man of ripe age, and his sons Esau and Jacob buried him.
All right. Wow, there's so much here. Oh, we're going to be looking at this. But our next, we wrapped up a month ago with verse 21, where Israel, Jacob journeyed on and pitched his tent at Adar, the Tower of Adar. But I purposely left 22 to begin talking about it today because it is so weird. It's just like this verse is just thrown into this text, that this happened. It's not so much that it's introduced, but the problem that we have is there's no commentary on this. 22, it says, and it came about while Israel was dwelling in that land that Reuben, who is the firstborn, went in and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard of it. And it's like, okay. And then all of a sudden it switches. It's like there's a whole piece of this missing. And this is what I would like to talk about. Why is that? I mean, we're just left hanging on this whole thing. This is so absurd, this whole thing. Yes, Alan?
Well, in the concordance there on this verse, it says, Reuben's act was an arrogant and premature claim into the rights of the firstborn.
Yes. Uh-huh. Right. So there's there is an explanation, and that's a common explanation, of which I have no doubt that that's true. But it still emotionally leaves the reader hanging. Why is there no description or effect from this absurd, really an aggressive kind of way out of the acceptable realm action by this son? Now, if we skip ahead to chapter 50, when Jacob's last words to his son, this is going to come up, but we don't know that yet. And why is there no comment here? So I'm going to offer in the last 10 minutes here an idea, and this is really about interpretation. This is one way to look at it, just simply dismiss it and say, well, there's something missing here. There's, obviously there was a mistake here and so forth. But I don't take to that view. I look at it, and this is my whole approach of Scripture and interpretation. We have to deal with the text that's here. I believe I accept this by faith that it's in the written form that God has intended for us. And so therefore, let's accept it as it is. Let's not try to change it or explain it away, but let's try to understand what could be said here. And so that's my, at least my idea. So I'm calling this little explanation here the feeling of this text. Now, I've already tried to make an attempt of how I feel about the text. I feel like I'm left hanging. I feel like there should be more explanation here, and there is not. So how do we deal with this? Well, in a normal story, in any given story, universally, this is true. And what is true is that a story is a relationship. A story is a relationship between the teller and the listener in every single case. The teller is leading the listener along. There's a relationship. There's information being imparted to the listener, and it's important that the listener is being brought along in the story. So this represents the storyline, and as the teller continues on his or her process in the story, the idea is to bring the listener along with you to impart, and that's what we call imparting the story. So it's a relationship, and that relationship is vital. You've heard the story, or you've heard the explanation. I was hanging on every word. Well, there's where the storyteller is doing a great job in bringing the listener along, and that's why I call it a relationship. Well, now as it progresses, as the story progresses, here is the idea. The storyline progresses, and so there's a series of exchanges between the teller and the listener. And so this was the prior relationship, but as the teller imparts a new piece of the story, then the listener can say, oh, I connect with that. I can now move to a new position in my progression and understand the next step in the story. So the story is a series of sequence and events, and it's important that the listener, or that the teller explains it to the listener in a way that the listener can understand to move and make that next progression in the step. I mean, it's the same, it's a universal law in telling stories. You know, the converse idea would be, I lost you. I lost you. You know, that means you are here and I am here, and I don't see the connection anymore. And so that's not good storytelling. The good storyteller wants to bring the listener along. Well, okay, in this case, we're reading the text and we're moving along, and this new, in verse 22, this new paragraph is introduced. This new step is introduced, okay? And we can go along with that. We understand at the end of 22 that Reuben, the eldest son, went in and had a sexual relationship with Bilhah. And there is interpretation, as Ellen brought out, why he may have done that for a power move. Not only a sexual, lustful move, but it could have been power motivated to be the firstborn in the family. But therein, in verse 23, is the problem. There is a huge disconnect. And so the story, we have to accept the fact by faith that this is intended to be this way, but the feeling we get is we're left hanging. This writer, this storyteller in the text takes this harsh right turn without signaling. And so there's no turn signal. And we as the listeners, we just bust through and we continue on with this storyline, and we're left out in midair, and we're this big question mark. What in the world is going on? And so there's how I've depicted how I feel about reading this story. That this, I'm out here, God, what is going on here? And there's no action, there's no comment, there's nothing, except it totally switches into a whole nother subject area. And I'm calling it I'm calling this situation listener detachment. It's what your wife blames you of many times. And we're left hanging. Okay, so so this isn't the first time. Okay? This is not the first time this has happened. So this is my method of interpreting this. Have we seen this before? Yes, we have. Back in 34. Now Jacob heard that he, that's Shechem, had defiled his daughter Dinah, and his sons were in the field. Jacob kept silent. And of course, that's the first time we raised this question. Why was he silent? In fact, we see Jacob very silent during that whole chapter 34. Jacob takes really a back position, and his sons are actually leading what becomes an absolutely depictable act of slaughter with these folks at Shechem. And so here is where we see the first time that Jacob is silent. And I would venture to say it is the first time in the text. I've now looked at about 30 texts that I'll be developing next time. And this is the first time in the narrative that Jacob does not act. He's silent. And then now we compare this to chapter 35, verse 22. It came about while Israel was dwelling in that land that Reuben went in and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard of it. It echoes here, but in this case, it takes it one step further. It doesn't say he was silent. It has no comment on Jacob's response. It's just he heard of it, and then it's blank. And that is so intriguing to me. Why is this like this? So, not the first time. The two texts are back to back, close proximity. We have not seen this action of Jacob prior in his earlier life. And so the question is, what do we do with this? Well, next time, I'm going to go in, I'm going to go and I'm going to attempt to make an explanation. And it's going to be, well, actually, we're going to do a discussion first. I wanted to wrap up today with a group, little small table discussions, but we're not going to do that. Where we'll eventually go is that I've got an idea I want to submit to you of why this is like this, and we'll discuss that the next time we're together. Yes?
Yeah, the end of that statement that
Yeah.
I read earlier is, for this he would lose his legal status as firstborn. So,
For the act he would lose.
that's the end of the statement about firstborn.
Speaking of Reuben.
That he would lose his legal
Yeah.
status as firstborn.
That could very well be true, but I don't know how that correlates to the first comment you made when it was an act. I read several places where it was an act of power to take possession of what was his. I don't, maybe in the law, the tribal law of the family, I mean, I can certainly understand that reasoning. Did you have a comment, Dave?
Well, I want to jump ahead to your
No, that's okay.
Genesis 50. If you go to Genesis 49, 3 and 4, that's exactly what it says. He goes through that point.
Yeah.
Before he dies, he goes through all of his sons.
That's where it's going to go then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not. I know he's going to bring it up, but I don't know the exact words there. So we'll look at that. We'll look at it at least from Jacob's perspective. But right now he's quiet, and this is what I find so fascinating.
A father with all these boys doing all this stuff.
And he doesn't do a thing. Yeah, because we as the listener, I'm gonna build an idea next week or next time. That we have expectations as readers, as listeners. We have expectations, and this has something to do with how we read the text. So we'll look at that next time. So have a good week, everybody. Thanks for coming back. Thanks you two for playing, and we'll see you next time.
If you like stories, do you know
I do like
you know
stories.
AM 990, the Christian station?
Well,